All right, so we're here for module 7. We're working our way around the loop here. We're now at business strategy, innovation, entrepreneurship, and platforms. So today's really, for the most part, about innovation, and innovation in two ways: innovation through a startup process, and innovation within a corporate umbrella. So when we use the word innovation within a corporate umbrella, it's called corporate entrepreneurship. So let's go back to 2008, the Great Recession. We've talked about this a couple of times. The crisis sets in. We were over levered as a society. People were carrying 3 mortgages. They had their primary home, but had a mortgage for condominiums that they were renting out. Boom, we get a crash, place melts down. Now, what's the interesting thing now is price of homes, as many of you know, are going crazy. Back then, they were actually dropping. So it's a kind of a different situation. But the crisis sets in, businesses and consumers cut back, new innovations and business models are introduced. So in this case, what we see is when we go into what's called the valley of despair, and that is the businesses and consumers cut back on spending. There's a lot of unemployment. We just go into a stagnation mode. And this is when innovation occurs oftentimes. You innovate when you're in pain or you anticipate pain. So this is when Uber, Airbnb, and Tesla all started to gain momentum. Then technologies are forged together into bigger and better systems like cloud and AI. And we've still been waiting for that big time investment in new infrastructure. We just haven't been able to get our politics together to do it. And then once that happens, of course, the new economic landscape forms. Now with COVID, and we know COVID is an accelerant, it's actually about 16, 17 months and counting now, more than that actually. And it's similar, crisis sets in, new innovations and business models are introduced. So we're seeing cloud kitchens, BOPIS, remember what BOPIS is, buy online, pick up in store. New technologies are forged together. And what I think is going to happen is a lot of these are going to be in the healthcare area. Again, we're still waiting on that new infrastructure. If the infrastructure deal goes through now, a big part of it will be in green energy, which will be environmentally friendly strategies, which will have a huge impact on electrification of automobiles. If the infrastructure deal goes through, and Ford has been putting out their media reports, and General Motors has been putting out theirs, they're essentially letting our senators and House of Representatives that they are ready to jump into this big time. So we've got major lobby dollars being spent on in DC right now dealing with all that. And then new economic landscape develops. So I was talking to my client in the convenience store industry. He's a young guy, 36. This is big time for him in terms of the EV, because I think we well over 100,000 convenience stores. I think he told me 130 in the US, and that's probably going to go down well below 100,000. Now you would think the Sheetz and the Wawas of the world will survive. So it's going to be a lot of the mom and pop 5-10 store convenience store operators are going to be experiencing a great deal of stress, because they got to figure out what role are they going to play in the electrification of automobiles. But the innovation is really starting to pick up ground. I do want to introduce you to a brand. We've talked about it. I've got her podcast and how I built this set for this Wednesday, the 13th. This is Christina Tosi. Christina Tosi started out at UVA as a math major, transferred to JMU, graduated from JMU, and ended up going to culinary school, where she learned how to be a pastry chef and baker. Then she connected with Mama Fuko up in New York and has become quite the celebrity chef. She's been on Netflix before. And you can see when she started. So she actually started, ironically, the month that the markets and everything started to crash in the recession. How would you like to do that? Have a startup at the at ground zero of that great recession. And she opened bakeries very deliberately along the way. It was getting a lot of great brand recognition. She had brand equity, very well known in the restaurant world. And then, boom, COVID hits. And so they had to shut down their brick and mortar. And remember firm effects, the strategic thinking ability, the leadership ability of the senior leadership team. And so they pivoted to an online presence. We're able to make that happen very quickly. What you see at the top of the box is one of their delicious, two of their delicious cakes. So you make an order to Milk Bar, and these cakes are delivered to you, I don't know, within 2 or 3 days. It's really good. So they're frozen, and then as they are being transported to you in your home, they start to unfreeze, even though they've got packaging in there that keeps them very cold. They get to your house, and then the process is you put them in the regular fridge, and then it ends up defrosting them, and they're ready for consumption 24 hours after you receive them. They're really yummy. Now they're expensive. They're about 70, with delivery and everything. I guess it's 70 or $80, something like that. But really what these represent are a gift to yourself or a gift to a loved one or a friend, who is their birthday or a graduation gift or something, and you don't know quite what to get them. You give them a gift card from Amazon or Target or whatever, but this is a really thoughtful gift, and the quality is really good. So you're getting a gift, but you're also getting something that can be immediately consumed and enjoyed. And so we've done it a number of times. But the really great thing about it is Milk Bar was able to pivot into the online world and has done extremely well as they've gone through the process. And what they've also done is they've pivoted to a CPG world. So they're a new entrant into that. You can get them in Target, and I'm not sure all the other stores you can get them in, but they're really good. So they've actually got one of the most complicated business models because they have their own brick and mortar Milk Bar stores. You can buy products online from them directly. And you can go into Target and other stores to purchase them in the other stores. So who does that sound like? Yes, you're right. It sounds like Patagonia. You have Patagonia stores that they sell their products in. You can purchase them in REI. I think you can actually get them in Dick's as well. And then you can order them and from their online area as well. So Crystal, you said you can get them in Giant, and if you like them at the Milk Bar too. So it's a great product, and so I hope you enjoy the podcast and listening to her as they talked about pivoting. Now they've diversified even more. So they've moved into the milk, I should say, the dairy segment with this ice cream. You can get these at Whole Foods stores. So you can purchase them right there on Broad Street, the Whole Foods at Broad Street. Look at those unique flavors. So a source of competitive advantage for Milk Bar is their flavor innovation. So you look at that pie, cornflake, chocolate chip, marshmallow, cereal milk. I don't know if any of you eat cereal. I actually had cereal today, and there's nothing like that. As you're eating that last piece of that last bunch of the cereal, the milk at the bottom. Then Christina Tosi had an innovative thought around that. So she's turned that into Ice cream, it is really yummy. And then birthday cake too. So they diversified. It's a complicated business model, and I'm just so impressed with how they do and how they perform going forward. So give them a try if you haven't. So you do your research, you do your external, you're looking at the industry, you do your Prestel, you do your Porter's Five Forces, you're doing your primary research, you're checking out social media, you're looking on Reddit, you're doing survey, you're doing interviews, and you have all of this data, and then you create a SWOT assessment from the data, and then you summarize what are our 3, 4, or 5 big conclusions, from our research, and or what we call opportunities or dilemmas, and then those translate to what your growth alternatives are going to be. So all of these that we've listed here are potential areas of strategy. So when you do your project for Lowe's and when you do your group project, I'm not going to say this is an all-inclusive list, but it certainly gives you a head start. So the first one up there is around product and service innovation. We'll spend today talking about that, but just real quickly, geographic growth. So if you think about Five Guys and Chick-fil-A now, their primary focus for growth is geographical, with incremental innovation in the product category up on top. Five Guys has gone to Europe. I don't think Chick-fil-A has. Chick-fil-A was very afraid to go up into Northeast till they opened up their store in downtown Manhattan or Times Square. It's done very well. So now they actually have moved up more into the New England area. So they actually had a bit of a mindset, a fixed mindset paradigm about going up north. They didn't think their brand would travel well up there, but it's actually done great. Vertical integration, which is what Walmart has done, opening up the milk plant. You just say to yourself, we're not making money anymore. We're going to divest. Actually, Pringles was owned by P&G a number of years ago. P&G primarily focuses on home products as well as grooming products. And so they said, what the heck is food doing in here? Let's divest ourselves of Pringles. You diversify, so you're not totally dependent upon one line of business, outsource key processes. So you think about Patagonia again, they've outsourced all their manufacturing. The only bit of manufacturing that Patagonia owns is their surfboards. Yvon Chouinard, the founder's son, runs the surfboard company, and they actually make them those surfboards themselves. And of course, Target outsources all of their manufacturing. Patagonia outsources all the rest of their manufacturing, and even Milk Bar has co-packers that they work with who do their manufacturing. So do you want to vertically integrate and own manufacturing, or do you want to have outsourced partners in that regard? You have cooperative relationships. We'll spend a lot of time talking about those later on in our modules. You're coming up with a new business concept within the umbrella of the organization. Remember, I talked about UCrops came up with their own bank. We came up with our own uniform store that actually still exists today. It's called UCrops Threads. They provide uniforms for about 1 million people, 1 million employees across the United States. You're going to focus on technology. I know we've got a number of information systems students in the room. So typically what's going on today is technology becomes a way for you to implement strategy. So you're either going to try to get close to your customers, you're going to use it as a source of process innovation, but technology is so important. You're going to leverage the brand, you're going to acquire and merge it with another business, overhaul the business model, or even more fully engage the customer fit the brand. So when you come up with your, I'm asking for 3 for the Lowe's project. Maybe it's 3 of these that you see listed here, but it goes back to the research that you've done. That's such an important consideration. And when you do your group project, I'm only asking for 2 strategies for your group project. So as we go through our modules, we'll be going into those in more detail, but today we're really focused on innovation. So that very first one up on top. What is it? So what's interesting about innovation is within a given brand or a given organization, the act of creatively coming up with something that you can commercialize. That's ideation, right? But somebody else might do that. And you say, that's a good idea. We're going to go ahead and imitate it, and we're going to come up with a new product or service within our system. But it's something novel. It's something useful, and then you figure out how to implement it. Ultimately, that's innovation. So innovation is what ultimately drives a product or the creation of a product or service, which translates ultimately to revenue, which becomes the fuel for growth and hopeful profitability. So if we look at innovation as a competitive weapon, we look at Apple Computer, innovation is a source of competitive advantage for them. I would tell you that I do not think Chick-fil-A is that innovative. As great of a brand it is, their focus is on service excellence. Their innovation, they're going to innovate, but it's going to be very, very incremental. Maybe they'll come up with a new salad every once in a while. I think they came out with a brownie last year, or or a diet lemonade or something like that. But innovation as a competitive weapon is a really important consideration. So let me use sushi again as an example. We've talked about sushi before. So sushi's been around for thousands of years. I guess it came out of Japan. We know in Seattle there's a large Japanese Asian population. There's a supermarket there called Quality Food Centers, QFC, and back in the early 90s, they were the ones who pioneered the idea of bringing sushi into a supermarket. And if you recall, I happened to be visiting there, saw the idea, and decided to see if we could bring it back here to Richmond. Told one of my buddies up in Philly. He was able to jump on it quicker than I were, but we did it. They did it. QFC did it, and it became a great idea. So QFC didn't have the idea for sushi. QFC took the concept and they transformed the idea into a product within their stores. So how do you sell it? You had to figure out, first of all, how are you going to make it? Were you going to make it yourselves? Were you going to outsource the making of it in the sushi bar? Who was going to build the sushi bar? All those things. So you figured out how you're going to do it. And where the innovation really comes in is the commercialization of the invention. And so let's put it in a sushi bar. Boom, people are buying sushi, and you get that sushi bar up to $10,000 per week. The business model was you outsource the sushi manufacturing, and then you get 20% of whatever they sell. So right away, you get $2,000 to your bottom line. It's about 8 weeks to pay that sushi bar off. Your return on investment is fast and it's lucrative, and everything past that 9 weeks is all gravy right to your bottom line. And so once QFC did that, then of course we jumped in, the Philly friends jumped in, and then now it's everywhere. I mean, you don't see it at Food Lion, you don't see it at Walmart, but you got it at Kroger, you got it at Whole Foods, you got it at Wegmans, you got it at Publix, and it's incredibly successful innovation. I would say sushi bars and supermarkets been one of the more innovative, profitable business ventures over the past 20 years. And they're still trying to come up with another product innovation similar to sushi that they can put into the stores. Down in Texas at HEB, they've got the flat taco maker machine that is doing very, very well in that market, and you might start to see that more throughout the United States. Whole Foods was experimenting with a donut maker that really didn't do that well. So this is innovation and the power of innovation. But remember, when you think about innovation, we're ultimately trying to drive new ideas for products and services that create sustainable sources of revenue and funding. So we go back to Milk Bar. The innovation at Milk Bar was the the original idea was building the bakeries and then putting products in those bakeries, then pivoting to online and being able to make those centrally and then selling them online, and then coming up with the products, packaging them so they can then be sold in Targets and Giants and other stores. So that is innovation. Now you have to make sure you have the capacity and the capability and the necessary supply chain to make it happen. That's where operational excellence comes into play. So innovation can actually occur on the operational side of the business, which is how can we innovate to create better speed, to create better accuracy, higher level of quality, safety, or whatever else your brand requires. And then even innovation can be used in culture, coming up with new innovative ways to create a higher level of engagement from your employees. We'll talk more about that as we work our way through the semester. So remember this, the moat, keep it wide and deep, and innovation becomes a way for you to keep it wide and deep. And so you think about the brands that require innovation, and certainly Apple is one of those, car manufacturers, Mercedes, et cetera, or in the whole idea of the connected car is really starting to gain traction going forward. So innovation can be a source of competitive advantage, but not for all companies. My old company, Ucrops, we did have food innovation as a source of competitive advantage. We didn't have a food innovative culture, though, for the most part. Whatever innovation we came up with tended to come from a handful of people, which is okay. We wanted a service excellence culture, very, very similar to what Chick-fil-A has evolved into. And so you have the metaphor of the castle, of course, and oftentimes competitors are going to use innovation to render you no longer relevant. That's what innovation can do. So when you think about innovation, it can really help an organization succeed, or if a competitor does a great job with innovation, it can really hurt. So innovation can destroy and create value depending upon where you are on the innovation continuum. So if you remember the traditional networks versus cable providers, and then cable providers versus streaming content, it'll be interesting to see the shelf life. Cable, I think cable started coming in. I remember watching HBO in 81. So that was through cable. So I want to say late 70s. So you think about 80s, 90s, 2000. So it's it's been 45 years or so, or thereabouts, for cable. What's going to be the shelf life, the how long streaming video will be relevant for us? We're still in the introductory phase, starting to move maybe beyond that into the growth phase. Let's just say it's in the growth phase. Sooner or later, it's going to be a shakeout. We'll talk more about that later. Typewriters to PCs to mobile devices. You got tablets in there as well. Portable music devices to smartphones, and it comes in waves. So typically, when you think about innovation, it will result of oftentimes just a point of pain. Innovation occurs typically when you're in pain or you anticipate pain, and of course this terrible tragedy of 9/11 did create innovative opportunities, and many of which we live with right now, and this is one of them. For many of you, you don't remember what life was like getting on an airplane before 9/11. It took no time whatsoever. I think there was a little thing you put your bag through, maybe. I don't even remember, but I think they had some stuff so you couldn't bring guns on, and but the hijackers, I think, brought primarily knives, etc. So they did have some level of security, but it's nowhere near what we've got right now. And so almost overnight, all these had to be, this process had to be transformed to the point where this is what it looks like now when we all go into airports, particularly busy airports, to fly around. Boston Airport, which I fly in all the time, it's not quite this intense, but it's pretty close to it. And so I, always plan to get there about 2.5 hours in advance, because sometimes this thing really gets backed up. If you've ever been to LAX in California, I mean, you got to really get there well in advance of your flight time. So this came from the tragedy of this. And so this is oftentimes innovation comes from when you're in pain or you anticipate pain. And the anticipation of pain is the fact that you've got highly competitive rivals. So the rivalry is very intense, or you see new technology coming in and you have to figure out what you're going to do. So going back to the convenience store, this young 36-year-old convenience store operator who wants to have 35 convenience stores by the end of 2026, he's got to figure this out. And a lot of the older C-store owners that are right now in their probably 50s and 60s, hate to say it, but it's going to be difficult for them to decide to reinvest significantly in their business. So, we'll see where it all ends up, but the pain and opportunity associated with electrification of automobiles is going to have a significant effect. So when you talk about innovation, right, we talk about key learning points, and we go back to our conversation around paradigms, and they're common. If you remember, we wake up, we go to work, we come home, we go to bed. At least that's the way it was before COVID. For some of us now, as we wake up, we walk up the steps, we go into our office, we do our thing, walk down steps, and and then you're walking around munching and snacking and going out on your tractor or whatever. I mean, my day is so different now than it was a year and a half, 2 years ago. But that's going to come to a screeching halt. So because I found out that in the spring, both my 2 undergraduate sections will be in class. So I will go back to my old paradigm, which means that there's going to be an element of change. But what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take what I learned from this process. We'll probably still have some virtual days, where you don't have to come into the classroom every single day. But I have to think about this, as I now know what my new state's going to be in the spring. So paradigms are common, they're useful. When you hire new people, they bring in their own paradigms, which can be good or bad. Hopefully they're bringing new energy in, a new growth mindset in. To shift paradigms does take a lot of courage, because it essentially means you're going to have to do more work to get yourself set on what you're going to do that you got to change. It is I didn't really choose to change my paradigm and become an online professor, but I had to. Remember, you do it when you're in pain or you anticipate pain. I had been asked to be an online MBA professor 3 years before COVID, and I said I want to do it. I stayed in my paradigm, and then when COVID hit, I didn't have a choice. And then one of my buddies that was teaching the online strategy OMBA program left. I filled his spot, and now I'm an online professor. So sometimes you do it because you got to do it. But to be solvent, to exist over a long period of time, business paradigms have to shift. But there's a shelf life. So Chick-fil-A's shelf life on just having chicken as their primary protein, that's worked for them because they've been able to innovate around that incrementally. They'll add a broiled chicken sandwich, they'll add chicken nuggets, they'll add new sauces that are great. They'll add salads, they'll add desserts. So little bit of innovation, incremental innovation keeps customers coming back. But I can guarantee you this, guys, at some point when Chick-fil-A starts to see their revenue drop because of geographic saturation or new competition or whatever, they will say, we've got to come up with a new paradigm. I don't think the paradigm will change about Sunday closing. I might be wrong, but they're able to handle that pretty well. In my old world, in the supermarket world, we were closed on Sunday and didn't sell beer or wine, and it ended up becoming a real weakness to us. I think we're still okay with Chick-fil-A, but that's a paradigm. Being closed on Sunday is a paradigm. Only having chicken as your primary protein, that's a paradigm. So I think we'll see Chick-fil-A at some point, 5 to 10 years, start to add another protein into their operation. So this is really going to be fun, I think. So this is when I say there's going to be a lot of innovation in healthcare because of COVID. So my mother-in-law had Alzheimer's, lived in the house for 4 years, had a caregiver. When COVID hit, we gave the caregiver the summer of 20 off, paid her, asked her to stay at home, start to bring her back when school started for me that fall. So August, brought her back and took her temperature every time she walked in the door, pointed at the temple, took it 98, whatever it is, 0.67, you're great. And then this company, Kinsa, which had been in the works, started to get a lot of press. In Kinsa, you take your temperature in your ear. It's like a smart thermometer, so it's uploaded into the internet. And what Kinsa is able to do is do a projection and use data to see where could be just COVID-19 spikes, but it's really influenza spikes. I mean, those types of sicknesses that elevate our temperature. And so I think what's going to happen, and Apple might be doing it in their next variation, but I think there's going to be an app. Maybe there's already an app out there. You guys tell me. You point, it's almost like a little flashlight, and you use your flashlight in your phone. You point it to your temple. It's able to take your temperature. It records, and then you upload it into your health system. So I think this is, you think about, for those of you who have children right now, think about it when they're little, they wake up, you feel them, oh my gosh, they've got a fever. Where's the thermometer? And then you go flying around the house trying to figure out who had it last, where is it? It can be a pain in the butt. So that's a point of pain, right? So you think about when Uber started, it was a pain point for customers. Crazy taxi drivers, you're not knowing where you're going, you're constantly thinking you're getting screwed. And so boom, Uber started, then the imitator Lyft started coming out very quickly thereafter. But I think Apple, you point it, boom, takes your temperature, you see the reading right away, uploads, and so right now Kinsa is creating a heat map. And so all of these temperatures are being uploaded, and you can see where you literally have hotspots. So it was a heat map, tells you where your customers are located. This starts to tell you where some outbreaks are. And of course, the dark red means there's more areas. So you see it happening in and around New Jersey and New York and up into the Massachusetts area, et cetera, and up into the Michigan area. And you see Chicago. So it's happening in big cities, more than likely, where a lot of people are flying to and giving it to people on airplanes, et cetera. So who's the customer of this? You and I will have the smart thermometer or the smartphone. It'll be a service. It'll be very easy to take the temperature. I don't know. I'm just hypothesizing here, but if somebody's not coming up with the idea, they're crazy. But we'll be a user, much like with Instagram right now. We don't pay anything. We're a user, but our data is able to be monetized by Facebook, and they make money on me and you. So that's probably the way it's going to be with our temperature, I would think. If you ever done 23andMe and some of those other, DNA companies, when you sign, you agree to give your data away. So your data, they're selling it to pharmaceuticals and other companies who are using the data to basically, use it for their business model. So this is the type of stuff that's coming in. Data is going to be even more significant, telemedicine, et cetera. So this is an interesting slide. On the vertical axis here, you see this is the ownership in the US. So this represents 50% of ownership. And along the horizontal, it's how many years it took to get to 50% ownership. So you look at the automobile, it took about 86 years, 87 years. So they first started, coming out in the early 1900s. So, and a lot of people don't own cars in huge cities, et cetera, but it took about 85 years to get a 50% penetration. I think it took about 18 years to get 85% penetration for a smartphone. So I want to say about 85% of the population, if not more now, has a smartphone. So if you think about electronic vehicles, they've been out. Tesla's now been out how many years? 4 or 5 years. And if this infrastructure bill comes through, that will provide a major stimulus to help convenience stores convert with supercharging stations, to incentivize us to get new cars. I think when Tesla came out, California gave you a $10,000 tax break, and then federal government 10. So they were very expensive, but you got a $20,000 tax break to buy a Tesla. So if we see that, and GM and Ford and the others are anticipating and getting ready for that, if we see that, you're going to see the adoption, I think, move pretty quick. So I've got my car and I've had it for about 5 years now. It's all paid off, etc. I love my car. It's a Infiniti crossover, so it's part sports car, port SUV. Really don't have any desire to buy anything new, especially now, given the supply chain issues in the automobile sector. But let's say I keep it for another 2 years, 3 years. Will I jump into the electric market at that point in time? Maybe. We'll see, because I don't really have to drive that much. I drive to VCU, and I drive around Richmond to clients, but I'm not driving any more than 45 minutes at any given time. I'll be driving to Kentucky in November. It's an 8-hour drive, but I'm going to rent a car at that point in time. So I don't know. We'll see. But here's how long all that stuff took to get to 50% penetration. So the people who are starting these businesses on their own, they're the agents who introduce change, like a Steve Jobs, like a Reed Hastings from Netflix, like an Elon Musk. They take economic risk to innovate, but so much of their money, it's initially friends and family to get them going, and then if they get a proof of concept, then they go to the street and they get their first $500,000, true seed money, and then from there they do a Series A and a Series B, etc. So they're creating new products, processes, new business organizations. They're trying to hopefully create value for society. I can't spell it, but if you're an entrepreneur within a business, it's an entrepreneur with an I. So you're innovating, but it's within a business. So when you're an entrepreneur like Steve Jobs, you got to find capital. Just got an email just before class, a colleague, he's on the board of a startup out of Tampa. It's an ice cream brand as well. They're coming to Richmond to try to raise capital. They've been able to raise about 1.3, and they want to get to 2 million. Met with Salt and Forge founder. I think we had talked about that last Friday. He's got his business model down set. He's ready to scale. So I'm going to introduce him to some potential investors. He's got a great business model, and he spent 10 years at Chipotle and knows anything and everything you want to know about it. He's very much of an engineering mindset. So, but the ones who are innovating within a company, it's a different set of skills that you have. The company is funding you, where Steve Jobs had to go to the street to get funders. Steve Jobs actually and Steve Wozniak, as you all know, were the two co-founders. Actually, a third dude who originally signed in the shareholder agreement. He was going to be the primary funder. He actually backed out and got out of his investment. The last I heard, he was running a food service operation in Las Vegas, but he, I mean, that move to not do it, he lost over $1 billion. It's a crazy story. It's in the biography of Steve Jobs. This is one of my favorite concepts called crossing the chasm. And crossing the chasm framework is where you got to be able to transition from the early adopters. So you look at this two ways, guys. Look at it as a new product, a new service that you've got to be able to sell and get it before customers, whether they're consumers or business customers, so they potentially buy it. And so whether you're a startup or it's a new product or a new service, you got to cross that chasm. And the chasm is really about moving from early adopters or early adoption. And when we talk about that, it's about 16% of the market, to creating momentum with the early majority. You got to be able to move beyond that. And if you don't, then you probably won't be successful unless you've got a business model where you're able to successfully operate with a small market. All right. And let me use my Pure Culture Consulting as an example. So I started it 16 years ago. It's a very simple business model. It's me and a bunch of 1099s. I only pay the 1099s when I get the work. And most of my 1099s have full-time jobs. So they work their full-time job and then do this as a side hustle with me. And so one of my 1099s was able to go to Antarctica with the money that she earned working on the side for me. And so I don't really need to cross a chasm of sorts. I mean, I have clients in Kentucky. I go up to Boston. Used to go as far west as Chicago and Ohio. Don't do that anymore. Had a relationship with Patagonia. But for the most part, I go Richmond, Kentucky, Boston, Virginia Beach. So I'm what you call a super regional brand. My business model is very simple. You know, I have a certain break even every single month. And as long as I go above that break even, I'm able to pay myself a certain salary. I'm able to pay off my operating expenses. And during 2020, I got through the year pretty much on fumes. I didn't lose any money, but I didn't make any money. This year has been a better year. But I operate just right to the left, that brown, you know, I'm right there. It's a very simple business model. But if I wanted to scale, let's say I want a Pure Culture to be a national brand, I have protection. Nobody can open up a Pure Culture Consulting, do what I do anywhere in the United States. It's protected. But if I wanted to do it, it would require significant investment, and it would be a different challenge to cross my chasm. So in other words, if I were to scale Pure Culture, I would find people like me scattered throughout the United States, and my ability to scale it and be successful would be predicated on their ability to find the customers in the markets of which they're serving. So, and those probably would have to be markets of about one point, you know, at least 1 million people who live in the area, you know, in that regard. So if you're able to jump the chasm, then you get into this early majority that gives you momentum. You move into late majority and then laggards. So this can be, again, a business idea, or it can be a new startup venture. So I consider myself to be early adopters for some stuff. Where I was a laggard was Canvas. When we got into Canvas, we were moving into the online world because of COVID. We had till May 31st, 2021 to make the change. So we really had about a year and a half to migrate. Our school gave us plenty of time. I started getting trained and I was preparing to do it in summer of 2020. And I got really confused trying to do Canvas and online at the same time. So I decided to focus on I had to becoming the online professor and kept pushing COVID back and back and back till I finally Canvas back and back until I finally had to do it and get ready for this past summer. So it was about a year. I mean, I literally did it. I had a week to spare. So I would say I was a laggard. I'm not proud of it, but that's the way it worked for me in that regard. So just because you're a laggard on something doesn't mean you're going to be a laggard on everything. And I'm still learning all the nuances and all the elements of Canvas. So I know, I'm sure there's professors that you got out there that are doing a much better job with me. So I'm getting better and better every semester. So who are the technology enthusiasts? And you can, you think about from Milk Bar, you can call them foodie enthusiasts. You can, you can come up with whatever term you want to classify the enthusiasts. But if we're talking about technology, they're going to enter the market in the introductory stage. They're really excited about it. They're about 2.5% of the market. They typically have an engineering mind. And again, we're talking about technology enthusiasts. They love to pursue new technology. You don't mind beta versions because they tinkerers. They'll actually take it apart. When Apple first came out with their desktop, I mean, a lot of their early customers were, electronic people who love to tinker, and they would actually take the computer apart. Then you have the early adopters. So you got the enthusiasts that jump in. Now the adopters are, they're starting to discover the brand, and this is about 13.5% of the market. So demand is driven by imagination and creativity. So now they're starting to see the power of the product. So if we go back to the Apple and their early products, the early Macintosh, I can remember I was back at Philip Morris at that time. The Macintosh had been introduced probably around 80, oh man, I'm guessing here, guys, but 85, 86, right around there. And we were one of the early adopters. So corporations became the early adopters for the early Apple products. And then as professionals, we were using it, and then you start to say, well, can I use it, in my home, and so that's where we start to get into the early majority, where people started to not only see its application at work, but the application of the desktop at home. So I do think Henrico was one of the first counties to get MacBooks. So I think that's a great point. I think they were. Don't know if they were the early adopter, but certainly close to early adopter and early majority. Early majority is where you really start to get wind to your back, and this is you've gone through proof of concept. So this ice cream brand coming up from Texas, cool. Yeah, Steve Jobs came to Richmond. Neat. And so, the early majority is really where the investors start to say, okay, I'm gonna jump in. We'll talk about Instagram when we get into acquisitions, and I mean, Instagram went from, when it was founded to when it sold to Facebook. I think it was about a 2-year process. And when they went out, and I think they had like 1 million downloads on Android within first day, I believe. And that's when you saw that, my goodness gracious, Instagram's going to be a big time hit. So when you get those real early investors, this is before they crossed the chasm, and that ice cream company out of Tampa, I was going to say, they really haven't crossed the chasm yet. So whoever's investing is putting a great deal of faith into the leadership team as well as the board to guide them forward. So that's the early majority. Late majority then is, all right, you're now really starting to bring in the dollars. It's about another 34%. And they really represent the majority of the market. And so that's the way it kind of works. And you got the laggards. These are the ones. This is me with Canvas. And I would even say me with a smartphone. It took me, a lot of my clients, etc. My boss, he jumped in. He was one of the first adopters of the BlackBerry around 2000. But I didn't get my BlackBerry till about 2006. So I wasn't a laggard, but I would say I was probably more in the late majority going forward with that. Here's another way of looking at it, guys. So you see the innovators, early adopters who select about which technologies they start using. They're the ones that you check in with for new information, and reduce others' uncertainty. So these are the influencers. These are the, you probably have them in all aspects of your life in different categories. The people who know about things that you want to know. Maybe it's craft beer, maybe it's wine, maybe it's cheese. And you call them up and say, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? And then by them convincing you or influencing you, you jump in and you get to be the early majority. So this is where companies are starting to hire these influencers right around here, because they can influence the early majority. And then the early majority influence the late majority. And then the laggards, I don't know who they're being. The only reason I jumped into Canvas is because I knew I'd better do it. Else you and I I'm going to be passing out handouts to you. I don't even know how I'm going to get them to you. So I had to do it. And again, because I was late doing it, I still haven't perfected it, but hopefully the more I do it, the more I'll perfect it. So your early market right here, innovators and early adopters, and then the mainstream market is right there. And so if you come out with a product, I don't know how many of you are eating sushi now, for example. Sushi is considered to be a destination product. There are sushi restaurants probably just about every pocket of the Richmond area, I would think, but still not everybody eats sushi. So I would say that we still got the laggards still haven't jumped into the sushi world, and you still probably have people that are late majority that are hesitant to go in. So sushi is a weird thing. It's destination. You get hooked on sushi. You could almost eat it every day. But I think we're still in the growth curve of sushi. So you look at the buyers, you look at the competitors in the introductory phase. It's development. Very few buyers. Trial by innovators. Very few competitors. And then as you start to enter growth, you got the early adopters, and then you start to increase market penetration. And that's when the imitators jump in. So they start to see the fact that it's going to be a good thing. So when we think about meal kit, I still don't quite get the value proposition in meal kit, but you had a lot of competitors jump in early, and then you moved into the shakeout which is, growing selectivity of your purchase. The weakest get out of business or they get bought. You have excess capacity. And then when you get into maturity, you have a mass market. It's a fight to keep market share at the expense of competitors. You start to see price jump in is more important than on the decline. You have the collapse of the demand. So we'll see. We'll see with meal kits. We'll see what's going to happen. We've pretty much still in shakeout with meal kits. It's moving very quickly, and many of the brands who do the meal kits cannot keep customers. They'll get a customer and then they'll lose a customer. So customer retention is a real big issue for meal kits, and I still don't think they've figured out the true value proposition of it. And so we look at CBD. This is another interesting. They haven't moved beyond the chasm. CBD became a rage, right? And but not every state, is digging on it, and so it's stuck. And a lot of it's stuck because of barriers to entry based on law stuff. But people still aren't convinced that it'll help what ails you. So I've got a friend, she's convinced you put a little dab will do it right underneath your tongue, and she uses it for sleeping rather than using Tylenol PM or Advil PM. She swears by it. I'll probably try it at some point. But you have the introductory stage, and it's very capital intensive. It's about being unique. You're trying new ideas to attract customers, and you're producing small quantities. So CBD, it's that whole industry, that category of sorts hasn't. I don't think it's moved beyond the chasm yet. Could be wrong. Right now we're, if we look at how many of you have tried a CBD product, a CPG CBD product, be interesting to see how many of you have tried it, but there's still resistance to it. So we'll see where we go with it, but I think it's still going to be a while until it gets into its growth stage. Plant-based proteins, certainly Impossible Foods, beyond meat. Nestle's got a product. Other big CPG brands have jumped in. So we're already aggressively going through growth stage. Like meal kit, I question the value proposition of the plant-based protein category. Yes, it does help the environment. John Mackey of Whole Foods actually gave this category their start. He brought them in, but he threw them out last year because he really wasn't feeling that it was healthy for you. And so my daughter, who's been a vegan and a vegetarian, rather hesitant to use this product. She will. If I had a cookout and I knew she was going to be there, or vegetarians were there, I would use this and they would eat it. But there's a little bit of worry that it's still not good for you, but it's good for the environment. So they've got to figure this one out. So the growth stage is that's when you really start to get the imitators jump in. So I'm going to have you listen to the Sweet Green podcast. And so that was actually last week on the 4th, right? So I hope you read that. And so they've got Naomi Osaka as as their brand ambassador. But this is a startup, and I believe in this place. And this is a really good product, good concept if you haven't been in. But they're somewhat on the coattails of the plant-based protein segment going in. I do believe you can get traditional protein in there, but it's a really good product. Shakeout, this is where the meal kits are right now. The rate of growth starts to decline because the people start to say to themselves, what's the big deal, right? And so firms begin to intensely compete. Weaker firms are forced out. You have industry consolidation. Only the strongest survive, and price becomes an important competitive weapon to the point where they're all fighting to the bottom of the barrel on price which is not fun, right? Remember, you have either you can differentiate or you can position yourself based on price. Maturity, only a few firms remain. So you got a lot of consolidation that's gone on. You got a lot of economies of scale. Process innovation has reached, kind of a maximum. So other forms of innovation are critical for differentiation. So this is where you have Bud Light, and the different forms of Bud and seltzer. They were buying up craft beer. I mean, the ice cream category is very much in a mature area, but Taste Milk Bar has been able to jump in with flavor innovation, and so far so good. And they've got a lot of people who really love the product, as a couple of you had mentioned on in the chat room. And then the decline stage, where demand falls rapidly, innovations start to, unless there can be disruptive innovation, you file bankruptcy, you harvest, maintain, or consolidate. So that is it, guys.